Bien, muchas gracias a todos por venir. Muchas gracias especialmente al senador Prokuritza, al embajador Hammer, a los distinguidos representantes de las Fuerzas Armadas que están acá hoy día, a los alumnos de la Academia Diplomática que nos acompañan, profesores, académicos y todos aquellos que tienen y que tenemos un especial interés en las materias de seguridad internacional. Esta es una actividad que se hace con el patrocinio de la Cancillería a través de la Dirección de Seguridad Internacional y Humana. Una dirección muy importante del Ministerio, a la que yo me siento particularmente unido. Me da una gran satisfacción, tengo un gran placer personal en presentarles al Almirante Jonathan Greenert, que es el 30º jefe de operaciones navales, como se denomina en Estados Unidos lo que aquí llamamos al comandante en jefe de la Armada. El Almirante nació en Butler, en Pensilvania, y ha servido en todos los niveles de mando. ¿Hay traducción? ¿Sí hay? Ok. Incluyendo el comando del submarino nuclear Honolulu, la 7ª flota de los Estados Unidos, el comando de flota de las Fuerzas Navales de Estados Unidos, y es el jefe de operaciones navales, o EE.UU, desde el año 2011. El almirante Greenert ha estado particularmente envuelto en la actividad de la Marina de los Estados Unidos en el Asia-Pacífico y personalmente, me lo contaba, ha estado destinado 2 veces en Japón. Ha tenido, por consiguiente, un trabajo muy importante para establecer vínculos de cooperación en este espacio pelágico que para Chile también es extraordinariamente importante, puesto que definimos buena parte de nuestra política exterior en relación con el Asia-Pacífico y hacia el Asia-Pacífico. Chile es un país del Pacífico y, como alguna vez lo dijo el expresidente Ricardo Lagos, quizás podemos imaginar de alguna manera a Chile como una pequeña Venecia del siglo XXI en el Pacífico, con todas las asociaciones históricas, políticas y también de seguridad que están vinculadas a este concepto. De manera que todo lo relacionado con el Asia-Pacífico es muy importante. Now let me turn to English. As I was telling Admiral Greenert, I am particularly interested in military history and especially in naval history. And this year we are commemorating the 1 century since more or less 1 century since the start of the First World War. And the First World War was preceded by one of the most spectacular naval races in history. It is well recorded that in a comparatively small span of about 15 years, concepts, designs, models of ships were changed dramatically. Whole sets of fleets were rendered obsolete by the appearance of the dreadnought, the famous HMS Dreadnought. We were part of this race too, in this very distant part of the world. And I remember a scholarly study stating that Chile was at a time perhaps the highest, the country with the highest ratio of kilos of battleship per inhabitant. We were so small at the time, less or around 2 million inhabitants. So what is happening today in the Asia-Pacific is in a certain way, matter for concern because of the tensions, because of the competitions that are taking place there, and in a geopolitical, with a geopolitical understanding of these tensions, we look in a very positive way and with a great deal of hope to every effort that could be mustered in order to bring peace and stability. And this is related to our own interest, Admiral. We are sending half of our exports to Asia-Pacific. So we wanted to keep it stable, peaceful, rich, and with a great appetite for Chilean goods. So with these words of introduction, I pass the baton to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Master. I appreciate it. Good morning. Good morning. I assume, yeah, I think I'm on here. Ambassador LeBay, thank you very much for that kind introduction and for the discussion we had beforehand. Ambassadors Hammer and Capper, thank you for coming today, and Senator Procurica, thank you. It's great to meet you earlier today. I'm honored to be here today. Forgive me, I will speak in English. That's my best language as it stands. And some people this morning said to me, well, I'm sorry that you have to get up and speak so early in the morning and a Monday morning of all things. And frankly, Washington is 2 hours behind here in Santiago, and they have freezing rain, and they can't get to work, and it is beautiful outside. So I'll do anything. I will go prepare your breakfast for you this morning just to stay here and not be in Washington, D.C., if that's all right with you. I'd like to talk today about what I call our mandate, our requirement as the United States Navy to our country, and really to the global commons we call the high seas, the international waters, and how that fits into the Asia-Pacific rebalance. Why our turn toward the Asia-Pacific, what makes that so important? First, for us, the United States Navy, as the Chief of the Navy, I'm responsible to organize, to train, and to equip our people, our units, our ships, our aircraft, and make them available and ready to perform, to do their job out there. And I'm also required to define the strategic intent of the Navy. And if I could simplify what our Navy is responsible to do for our country, it's to say, we need to be where it matters in the world when it matters. We have to be available when it most matters so that things stay calm, so that we are present to deter potential adversaries, to reassure and to assure allies, and to gain new partnerships, because it's about the global economy. That's the predominant thing that we do to operate forward, be where it matters when it matters. Now, I have a few graphics here. They're not wordy, but I have to use them to help show you my points. Could I have the first one, please? In simplistic fashion, and something, a little bit of physical science, 70% of this world is covered with water, and 80% of the world's population lives certainly within 200 kilometers of the coast. If you wonder about that, you say, that seems a lot. Anytime there is a typhoon, a tsunami, an earthquake, a volcano, anywhere near the coast, there are a lot of casualties, a lot of disruption, and tremendous financial problems resolved. Now, of this nation, of this world, which we depend on the ocean, next please, the trade routes, the predominant trade routes where our produce, where the world's economies traverse, are showed here. 90% of the world's trade travels by water. That's by volume. 90% by volume of the world's trade. Over 99% of the information, and that includes financial transactions, travels by underwater cables. So the ocean is our medium of produce and product, and it's also for information. Our economic prosperity is linked to the maritime security around the world. In other words, if any of those bloodlines, for lack of a better term, are interrupted, there's great impact around the world. Because the world's economy, the world's produce, those that produce anything around the world, are hyper-connected. What happens in Africa affects Asia. What happens in Far East Africa, what happens in the Far East will affect the world. What happens down here in South America in the rainforest, in Chile, in Argentina, you get my point, affects the whole world's economy. So all of it is important. Our dependence on world trade is also growing. Next one, please. This graphical here shows over the years how much the volume of metric tons has grown on seaborne trade. And the point I would make here is it's going to double by 2030. You can see the impact of the recession right in around 2008 and 2009 where there was a dip. But this is going to grow, and there's no way around it. And the dependence on petroleum is not going to go away either. There is going to be a growing dependence on petroleum. Some nations, we're fortunate in that in our country we're becoming a net exporter of petroleum if we continue on the track we're on. But so many nations are industrializing and they need petroleum to advance. So that's the fact of the matter. Now, next one please. The energy that powers the world economies, this petroleum, is going to have a requirement of reliability of trade. It needs the reliability of trade routes as it goes around the world. These are little indicators of super tankers in any given day around the world. This is where the petroleum of the world is at any given snapshot of time. So if you think of it like, imagine ants, going around your kitchen, trailing here and there, you can see the tracks very much reflect those global trade routes that I showed before. We need unimpeded flow, and we need reliable access to petroleum around the world. When you put all this together, as I think about where do we need to be, where does our Navy need to be, where around the world do we need to keep our eye on to ensure economic flow, you come up with what I call crossroads. Next. These things here, they look like bow ties, if you will, including the Panama Canal, are 6 of the predominant crossroads, maritime crossroads. Strait of Gibraltar up there by Europe, Suez Canal, Bab el-Mandeb Straits down here, certainly the Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Malacca. There are others that are very great. You go through the South China Sea, Asia completely depends on passage through the South China Sea. This is where the trillions of dollars, US dollars, and the trillions of metric tons of trade take place around the world through these alone. If these are interrupted, there's a major, major impact. And it's not just the price of petroleum. It's the price of milk, it's the price of coffee, computers, chips, your smartphone, everything. All within, pretty much dependent upon these 6 crossroads. So to me, the security of these crossroads is very important. And as I prepare and I think through the strategy of my Navy and where it needs to be and what kind of capabilities it needs to have, I think very much about these crossroads. Next, please. So our Navy is outlined, as I show here, in these dots right here. These are our bases. But these are places around the world, including Cuba, where we have facilities that are not ours. These are allies or friends that allow us to use these places as we are deployed forward, where we can refuel, we can repair, we can restock, we can rest with our crews, and sometimes we swap out our crews in these places around the world. And you see where we've located those, and I spend a great deal of my time working with partners, with allies, to see where can we establish a place. It's not going to be at a U.S. base. We're not going to put anything there permanently, but we want to use it to be able to operate around the world and cooperate with our friends and with our partners. What makes this presence and our ability to do our job, what makes all of this effective is to be able to we either rotationally deploy from a port over for a period of time and then back, we'll rotate through, or we'll put a ship forward and we'll rotate our people. We'll either keep the ship there, and sometimes, such as in Japan, in Bahrain, And in Spain, the country will invite us to bring our people, and they will actually live there with the ship, or sometimes we'll be allowed to leave the ship there and we'll rotate the crew there. But the deal is, the most important part of this is to have the presence forward, because being forward is where we can be where it matters, when it matters, and that's where it all comes together. Now our Navy today, next one please, this is a laydown of where our ships are today by area. We have 52 ships in the Pacific region today. 41 of them are out there all the time. We either have the crews there or we rotate the crews. And then you can see in the Arabian Gulf, North Arabian Sea, the Mediterranean, here in the Africa region, usually the western and eastern coast here in South America. And this is the number of ships that we have back in the States being repaired. They are in training, and they are in some semblance of preparation to deploy. When you add all those up, we have 288 ships, and we have 104 of those deployed forward, with 45 of our people deployed forward. Now I call your attention here to, I'm not sure you can read this very well, so I'll tell you what this means. If we are not deployed forward, if we are not ready to react on the spot, if there's a contingency, something goes wrong, this is the time it takes to go from the East Coast to the Suez Canal. It takes 15 days. From the East Coast to the Strait of Hormuz, 24 days, over 3 weeks. And then to the Strait of Malacca here, it would take a month from the East Coast. From the West Coast, it's a little shorter, depending on where it is. But you get my point, I think. It would take weeks for us, if we stayed back here in the United States and just kind of kept off the coast, for us to respond to these regions of the world where trade is so important. And we're keeping those lines, economic lines of communication, we call them, open. Those lifelines, that bloodline for trade around the world. Now with that in mind, let me talk a little bit about the Asia-Pacific and how does that fit into it? Well, we have a long history and enduring interests in the Asia-Pacific region. In fact, we've been there for a century plus, but we've been there in great numbers due to treaties for the last 70 plus years. And we've been strengthening our relationships out there, off and on, since really World War II. When our president announced what some called the pivot to the Asia-Pacific, for the Navy it was more of a subtle rebalance. It wasn't as dramatic for us in the Navy. It was greater impact for some other areas. It's not just military, this Asia-Pacific rebalance. It's diplomatic, it's economic, it's environmental, and it's involved in science and technology and being able to share things and see how do we want to develop and work in that region. Why is the region so important? Well, half of the world's shipping, over half of the world's shipping, measured by tonnage, passes through that Strait of Malacca down there by Singapore. A third of the global crude oil passes through the Straits of Malacca, or right next to it is the Lombok Strait. And right next to Lombok Strait, right there down there in Indonesia, in that archipelago, is that we've got Lombok, you've got Malacca, and you've got Sunda Straits. All three of those, 1/3 of the crude oil for the world. 1/2 of the liquid natural gas passes through the South China Sea. So that entire area is incredibly important for trade and its passage in there. Now, 5 of our trading partners, our largest trading partners, are in the region right out there in the Pacific. Chile's top trading partner, China, is in that region, obviously. China's our number 2 trading partner. Our number 2 overall trading partner, our number 3 export. And so we all have interests. We all have great equity on what goes on out there and the stability out in that region. But as you could see by that graphic on the oil, if you can get it, Danny, put it back up, on the economic trade, not the oil, but the bloodline, that the raw material and the need in Asia to produce things. No, go back to the red lines, please. A lot of what happens out here in Asia comes from outside Asia. And so the importance is all that much more that these economic lines, these shipping lanes, remain open. Chile is a bridge between the Pacific and South America. Your president said it, and she was right. It's clearly an important aspect to make Asia go, to make the Asia-Pacific region go. We are all interconnected in that regard. So 5 of our defense treaties are in the region: Japan, Republic of Korea, Australia, the Philippines, and Thailand. And in that presence that we have out there helps create a stable security issue. We tend to help keep people kind of balanced. Korean and the Japan have a long cultural issue with each other that dates back to World War II. Japan and China have a pretty well-documented issue, both cultural and in today, it's territorial in the East China Sea and the South China Sea. So our rebalance is designed to make sure our presence is right out there. And there are 3 aspects to this rebalance. Number 1, a lot of people want to talk about it, it's the forces. It's the number of ships and aircraft that we have out there. And in the next 3 years, we'll move 2 destroyers to Japan to be stationed out there. We'll move a submarine to Guam in this next year, in 16, and 4 smaller warships to Singapore. Now, I call out the 4 warships to Singapore as a matter of note, because this is very unlike the Singapore government to ask to have any country to come into their waters, and especially to station ships in their port. So forces is number 1. Number 2, capabilities. We are benchmarking our capabilities, our proficiency to conduct war at sea on what we can do in the Western Pacific. It's about electronic warfare, cyber, anti-submarine warfare, air-to-air warfare. All those capabilities we benchmark to the Western Pacific. But most importantly, number 3, it's about understanding. This rebalance is about understanding. It's about what we call intellectual capital. It's about refreshing our relationships and establishing new important relationships, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. It's about allies and partners and potential partners out there. We have a much more robust relationship with Indonesia than we've ever had before, and we were able to respond to this recent air crash because we had this relationship, and we were able to work with Malaysia during the Malaysian Airlines crash not long ago much more quickly because we have a improving and an expanding relationship. Our stalwart, next slide please, in the Asia-Pacific, are our allies in the Asia-Pacific region. And I'll talk a little bit about Australia and the United States. We have a force posture agreement that's really established in and around Darwin. And being out here, we have been offered to bring 2,500 Marines and to forward deploy them in Darwin by the end of this decade. We're working to do this in a phased approach, and that will provide us the ability to work with all of these southeast nations here, working out of Darwin in this area with our amphibious ships and our forces. Your Navy has a very good amphibious capability, a very good networking capability, very good command and control, and that sort of posture and that sort of proficiency is something that we'll work on together. Additionally, the Republic of Korea and Japan are critical allies, and we work very much in getting a trilateral effort up in this region in order to protect against ballistic missiles from North Korea. Next, we need to enhance partnerships. And that it involves Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Brunei. We have an exercise series we called Cooperation Afloat for Readiness and Training. It involves humanitarian assistance, building partnership capacity, counterpiracy, counterterrorism, and just security at sea, keeping the sea lines of communication open. And we work with those countries both bilaterally and also multilaterally in that regard with that exercise series. Next, we have a strategic partnership with India. This is a great opportunity that we think could bear some fruit And with the Modi government just recently taking office and an offering to expand their exercise series, we'll see where that goes. We recently did a trilateral exercise with Japan, India, and the United States off of in Japan's waters and also down in the South China Sea. So our president is visiting India later this month, so this is an opportunity to build on that strategic partnership. But I think perhaps one of the more important efforts we have out there is to build a constructive relationship with China. We have, as I said, as you have, an intertwined economic situation with China. It is our #2 trade partner, as I said, and we have the mutual prosperity of our economies is definitely in our best interest. We have contact points with the Chinese, and we've worked with them, and it's been a good year in 2014 working with China. They were there at Rim of the Pacific exercise, and they have agreed to a protocol of interactions at sea to preclude miscalculation, to make sure that when we meet and when all Pacific nations, navies meet in the Asia-Pacific region, that we have a set and distinct and predictable set of protocols to work with each other. So we're committed to a secure Asia-Pacific. The alliances are strong. We will honor the treaties. The engagement both multilaterally and bilaterally are important, and we have to continue to nurture them. To me, we have to work our way through the issues that are evolved in the South China Sea. We can't just stand there and wait and cross our arms and hope that this thing gets better. We have to work with each other and manage our way through this. Chile is an important part of that, as Chile is a part of the Pacific, as Chile is a part of Rim of the Pacific, as Chile's Navy operates with us and other international partners. And I'm very honored to work with your Navy and see what they can bring for both what's good for the nation of Chile and also for the economic prosperity of the Pacific. Thank you very much for listening. I'm very interested in now taking your questions.
Bueno, muchas gracias al almirante Greenert por una interesantísima y bien focalizada presentación. Y ahora quiero abrir el espacio para las preguntas que ustedes quieran formular. Profesor Navarro. ¿Hay micrófono? Ah, aquí están los micrófonos. A ver quién está. Okay. Do it in English then.
I'm Professor Navarro from the National Academy of Political and Strategic Studies, the campus equivalent of the National War College. The question is the following. All through your presentation, you never mentioned another major Pacific partner or another major Pacific country, Russia. And given the, so to say, deterioration in the relationship between Russia and NATO and also the United States over the Ukrainian crisis and other issues, how you see Russia fitting into this picture in the Pacific, given that an important part of the Russian fleet is in Vladivostok right now, and the Russians are actually putting a lot of money into the Navy and into the armed forces in general?
That's a good point. And if I were to speak longer, I would have brought Russia in. Russia continues to contribute to some of the international, not only exercises, operations for counter-piracy and counter-terrorism. So that's good news, particularly in the Gulf of Aden. Iran contributes to counter-piracy in the Gulf of Aden. So my point is, Russia is continuing to do their part in that regard. Russia was in RIMPAC in 2012. Regrettably, due to events in Crimea and in the Ukraine, we were precluded, we didn't invite them to 2014. So I'm hopeful that because they are a major part, a major neighbor in the Pacific region, that we can work to develop a more standard, a more stable relationship and work together with the Russians and bring them back into this. But for now, the behavior of Russia is just contrary to us being able to do that. So I leave you with the Russian Navy and their military is, if I'll call it, out and about, much more active, flying and steaming in regions. They have not been particularly aggressive or contrary to good standards. They've met the rules of the road and the international protocols. But it would be in all of our best interest if we could bring them back in, and let's just hope that it continues in a positive direction.
El senador Procuritza, por favor.
Gracias, embajador. Bueno, darle la bienvenida al almirante. Yo quiero hacer dos consultas. Quizás la primera es porque vivimos aquí, somos de aquí del barrio, pero entre los puntos estratégicos que el almirante exponía en los cuadros, me llamó la atención que no aparece el estrecho de Magallanes, que nosotros consideramos un punto muy estratégico, ¿no? Y en segundo lugar, dentro de los puntos de interés y de los lugares, tampoco él menciona la Antártida. Yo creo que eso debe tener alguna razón.
Yes, I don't know, and I was just inquiring about it, but I didn't get an answer in time, the amount of economic trade through the Strait of Magellan. But as I understand it, it's extraordinary, and so I have to go back and make sure that I consider all the important straits of the world. Secondarily, the Antarctic. We in the United States have been looking at the Arctic more, but also we are slow, but we are turning to the Antarctic. And when we do our next maritime sea power symposium, we will consider what is our strategy for the stability in the Arctic and the Antarctic, given that both are opening and will invite more shipping and more activity in that region.
Allá había una pregunta, sí, por favor.
Well, first of all, I'm a second-year student from this diplomatic academy. Thank you for being here. Currently, there is a territorial dispute between China and Vietnam and I think another country. And this dispute is about one of the main growth routes you mentioned in Asia. So, and it's about to go to the High Court. And I would like to know what is the United States doing about it and how this affects the United States interest. Thank you.
Well, we've supported, I think the third country would be the Philippines when you mentioned the High Court, and that's a territorial dispute in the maritime domain, if you will. And we support the use of any diplomacy, peaceful means, to resolve territorial disputes. So we support using, if you will, the law of the sea treaty and the tribune that oversees that, the High Court that sees that. Our stance has been that those are international waters, that freedom of navigation has to be sustained there. China understands that. They understand that we will be in the South China Sea, as I said, present to assure that free flow of trade. We believe that territorial disputes have to be resolved diplomatically, peacefully, and that's what we very much encourage among the players there in the South China Sea.
Juan Pablo.
Good morning, Admiral. Good morning, Admiral. My name is Juan Pablo Rosso from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. My question is basically, what would you say is the hardest part about dealing with China, militarily and also politically? Is it strategic ambiguity? How have you thought through the process of hybrid warfare with the Chinese, the fact that they use Coast Guard ships or fishermen to advance their claims?
I think on a routine basis, the hardest communications and transparency of intentions, the strategic intentions. China says that they're only interested in their defense of their near seas, the areas of interest to them, but then their claims are extraordinary and not based on international norms or international institutions. And so when they don't use that, we don't understand. It's hard to have a basis for a discussion or a debate for clarity to get on where they're going on that. So we've worked very hard. I mentioned an international set of protocols for ships who come in contact at sea. That's called the Code for Unplanned Encounters at Sea. And it's an agreement, voluntary, signed by the nations of the Western Pacific. And it's important because at that point now you understand how we're going to communicate, by what means, and it's predictive in nature that when two ships come together, what should you hear? How much of a standoff will you have? Because what's most disconcerting is if you have two individuals who are on a warship, and they're about 40 years old, they're responsible for about 300 sailors, members of somebody's nation, and they're coming together in the fog or in the haze, and they don't know what the intention of the other is. Tensions are high. One claims you're in my territorial water, the other says no, I'm not. That's just not a good start. And that's how things historically have gotten out of hand very quickly. So to preclude miscalculation, I think, is very important. So when I use the term we need to manage our way out of here, I think we need to have good, hard, clear discussions with each other on what our intentions are strategically and operationally.
Ok, gracias, Almirante. Dos preguntas más, al comandante acá y el colega allá.
Almirante, how are you? So my question to see you one more time here in Chile. Almirante, as you know, I was working as a Navy attaché in Washington a couple of years ago, and I know the situation why you change or you move your focus from Middle East to Asia-Pacific area. Actually, it's not like a Navy policy, it's a President Obama policy to move and put the focus in Asia-Pacific. So my question is, the situation in Middle East could be not 100% complete today. So we have some focus of terrorism in Middle East until this day. So do you think that the policy to move or your focus in Asia-Pacific could be changed in the next 10 or 20 years to the rebuild of the terrorism in the Middle East or in another place around the world?
Good question. We get that often, and I understand how our statement can build a curiosity. Strategically and looking at for the long view, our focus we have to rebalance to the Asia-Pacific. It is economically the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do because 5 of our 7 defense treaties require it. And this nation being connected and bridging, as well as so many others, we have to have a solid and growing economy in the Asia-Pacific region. However, we are committed to the Middle East. We have partners and friends there, and we will live up to those commitments. So we have to do it both. Maritime-wise, we can do it with our plans for today and in the future. The operations that are taking place today, I'm doing with the ships that we nurture that I've showed up there, the 30-some ships that we put in the Middle East, and I think we'll be able to do it for the future. It's a lower intensity of conflict. It is deliberate and it's long, and it tends to be ground-based, and we provide a lot of support in that regard. But I think we can do both. But our focus, strategically, long view, will remain the Asia-Pacific.
Y finalmente acá. ¿Se identifican, por favor, para poder...?
Good morning. My name is Andrés Tavolari. I'm a former National Defense Minister advisor. After looking at your slides, one can say that here in front of the South American coast, we have an empty sea. There aren't much traffic roads, etc. My questions are the following. What kind of participation or contribution would you expect from the navies from this side of South America in your strategic view? And what kind of contribution or participation would you appreciate from those navies? Thank you.
Well, my understanding, which can be rudimentary, and when it comes to South America, especially beyond the Caribbean, that northern region, is that the sea lines of communications aren't nearly as, the international, aren't as threatened as they are in other regions with piracy. So I'm looking down the coast. That's number one. Two, if I were to draw all trade routes up here, it would be a web that would be so interconnected and so wound, it would be illegible probably. So these were only the major many trillions of tons of movement across there. Contribution-wise, I think what your Navy is doing today is just about exactly right. Being regionally responsible and effective and able to respond very quickly. And to continue to be a part of what I call the global network of navies, where when we come together we share how things get done. Your Chief of Navy came to Newport, Rhode Island in 2011 and described in great detail and very clearly and very effectively how to respond to a disaster like an earthquake with the tsunami. And it was the lessons learned that he provided that enabled Japan, not long after that, the chief of the Japanese Navy to take back for their military to deal with the earthquake and tsunami they had there in northern Japan. So that's that sharing of global networks, that responsibility, that willingness to get together when necessary, you know, for a common interest, and how to do it quickly, I think is what we need to continue to nurture and develop.
Well, thank you very much. With that positive note, I thank Admiral Greenert for his wonderful presentation and for the exchange with the participants in this seminar. It is important to underline the fact that Chile is very much engaged as a responsible member of the international community in maintaining international peace and security. And the contribution starts for every country by keeping the house in order, then contributing to keeping the region in order, and then going further away to give a hand in endeavors which are in the benefit of everyone. And in the case of piracy, by the way, the battling of the US against piracy goes to the Jefferson's War against piracy. 1800. 1800, exactly, and in Algiers and Tripoli. And so perhaps, and we have been, in our exchanges with the Ministry of Defense, we have been stating that Chile's contribution to international security in the Asia-Pacific region could go a little bit further. I mean, enhancing the capabilities for humanitarian assistance and maybe getting engaged in the specific activities that are being done against piracy in the Red Sea, in the Gulf of Aden, as you mentioned, Strait of Bab el-Mandeb being one of the significant crucial points, one of those crossroads. So my message from the point of view of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is that we intend to remain active and eager, willing to be a good partner in the keeping of international peace and security, and in this respect our historical links with the US and with the US Navy are really terribly important. Thank you very much, Admiral.
Thank you. Thank you.